doing some neck rolls. Wait, I already got them. No problem. Welcome back to Colombian Influence. This is a podcast where we talk about adoption using our own experiences as adoptees as well as others in the community. Today we are going to be doing our book club series. We are on chapter 8 of the Primal Wound.
I'm ready.
So I know you want to start us off right away because
I lost something. Continue. Okay, continue. Go ahead.
But I think you are good at just kind of giving the brief outline.
Yeah.
I think if you've watched our show before, we just go over the main sections that really stick out to us.
Yeah.
So,
let's dive into chapter 8. Chapter 8 is titled Issues of Guilt and Shame, Power and Control, Identity. So, each section, basically, it's kind of, spoiler alert, I gave it away already, but we basically start off with the sections guilt and shame, and then go into power or mastery and control, which the subtopics of that section are adoptee as victim, life isn't fair. That one's a really long section. And then goes into the last section of identity, which again, that's kind of how that's really how it's all broken down. It's kind of, I think, getting
short and sweet.
Yeah, short and sweet is basically kind of what we have for this chapter. So guilt and shame don't make me feel great.
I don't think they'd make anyone feel very great.
But to be expected. For me in this section, though, literally all I noted was that the first section totally exhausted me. It was a lot of information. I don't know if anybody else out there feels this way. Okay, Erica feels this way. Okay, and I guess with your notes, you also didn't highlight that much?
No, I didn't highlight much, but I think this kind of all goes into, I mean, it's a lot to take in.
Why is it so overwhelming?
I know.
I think part of it is the fact that they're, like, defining guilt and shame and giving examples, and I'm like, which is it? Like, and it's a lot of information. It's just, like, thrown at you.
I think mine just jumps onto page 95. Again, a discussion question that I think we'll jump right into. I mean, we love these. We love hearing from our listeners. One that really stuck out to me is, let me just make sure I am going to say it correctly. Okay, so it pretty much talks about biological children feeling as if they're raised with a handicapped person who needs 90% of the attention. First off, I don't like how they worded that at all. Like, handicapped person, I just think that's very inappropriate. But for the sake of what they said in this book, they just have the biological children just feel guilty and for not having been adopted. And so I guess I just want to hear from people who have siblings who are adopted and they aren't. How does this make you feel? Do you feel that that, I don't know.
Do you think like overshadowing?
Right. Yeah.
Is that what kind of you're thinking of?
I think so. Like, just how did it make you feel having an adopted sibling?
Oh, that'd
essentially.
I mean, I guess that really has not been necessarily the audience that we've.
And I know I would love to interview my brother, and I know we've talked about that, and I think he definitely would. Shout out to you, Dylan. I know you watch all of our podcasts and listen to all of our podcasts and are a huge supporter and everything for this. So I would like to just hear that side of the story. That's another part of the triad that we haven't heard from or know any knowledge on.
Yeah.
So I think that'd be really, really interesting. Did you feel kind of,
hindered, I guess in some way, overshadowed?
Guilty for not being adopted, wishing you were adopted to get more attention? Did you feel like you got the same amount of attention? I think that's kind of one part that really was interesting to me because it's a part that I just don't have any knowledge on.
I guess, again, this first section is really just like, it really just overwhelmed me. I vividly remember reading it and putting my book down and be like, okay, we can finish this right now. It's going to be fine. Just take a minute. Like, this is it's just a lot of information again. So
is the entire book.
I mean,
said time and time again,
take your time.
For sure.
Yeah. And we both make sure that prior to recording these that we're reading it a few days before so that it's fresh, but that it's also not, bogging down on our I don't know, general emotional wellness as far as like having it to be weeks out and having to revisit it again so that it's fresh in our mind. So I mean, it's very strategic in that way. And hopefully also just having us like discuss this casually and you know, kind of little bits here and there that people can kind of use that as a, I don't want to say a crutch, but as kind of just like a helpful guide to get you through it, because it really should be taken slowly. And that's kind of what we're trying to do. Granted, it's kind of like our second time through at least the first half of the book now, kind of starting in fresh on some of the later parts of it. But
I think it's like what you said, a good crutch, but also a good discussion point on there are different sections on every aspect of adoption. So I think it really breaks it down perfectly on where some people have this more than others. It's just it's really, I think at this point, well written. I wouldn't say maybe well written, but like very validated and very eye-opening for a lot of parts.
Absolutely. So I guess that kind of wraps up that first section. The next section of this chapter, again, this chapter only has 3 sections, one of which has a couple subsections, and that's this next one. Power or mastery and control, which I feel like sounds really loaded and just kind of, I don't know, whatever. So the first section here is adoptee as a victim, which I thought was really interesting. And I actually, when I first read that subtitle, adoptee as victim, under the power, mastery, and control on page 96, I was kind of taken aback. And I was a little like, we're not playing the victim. And at first I was like, salty about it and just like, what does this mean? And just like before reading it. But then when I got into it, kind of with one thing that I noted here was that closely related to shame and guilt are control. And this section really goes into the misunderstood nature of adoptees being a victim, which brings me to my first quote of this section on page 96. Kind of jumping in halfway through a line, is that adoptees are victims of manipulation of the gravest kind, the severing of their tie to the birth mother and their biological roots. The feeling of being a victim is not just a fantasy, but a reality. And that is, I just did a exclamation point right there after underlining it, just like, oh, okay, that's heavy.
And I think this goes back to our previous, like, I think it was 2 chapters ago, where this is the only trauma that people expect us to be okay with.
Or grateful
for. Or like
for.
grateful for. Yes, that's what it was.
Yeah, grateful for.
Not okay with, grateful for. Yes, and it's just like, no, that's like, not the case.
That and just the fact, like the way that this words it is like, they are victims of manipulation of the greatest kind. You know, and it's just like, that is so like, they are, first of all, but of such high caliber,
right,
is just, I don't even know. That, and like this section finishes up saying, being abandoned often leaves one with a permanent feeling of being at the mercy of others. That's so much risk. Like that's, I think,
I didn't even highlight any of that, but like,
really,
that last sentence,
which I didn't either, I guess technically it was kind of at the end of that, because I really wanted to highlight the fact that adoptees are victims of manipulation of the gravest kind, kind of what I just went over. But the end of that paragraph saying, being abandoned often leaves one with a permanent feeling of being at the mercy of others. And that, I think, really just, again, this whole section goes back to me with being that, it goes back to control, or I guess I should say going back to the guilt and shame, is that it ties into that, is like, that's where we get that from, is feeling like we need to be in control, is that kind of thing.
Wow.
Did you have any from...
Kind of going off of that, bouncing off that, literally to the next page, 97, there seems to be an almost desperate need to be in control at all times.
I have that underlined too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get that.
I do too.
Yeah. I think that that's something that I think that we connected on pretty early on in our relationship and everything. And
I think so.
It is a desperate need to be in control at all times. And when there's something that's out of our control, we are totally at a loss as far as our, I mean, I guess for me, like when it comes to like medical things especially, that's where I just spiral out of control and I feel just like overwhelmed by everything.
And I think that comes up later in this chapter under identity, where it really talks about that more.
Yeah.
But I think also under this section as well is I talked about lashing out against adoptive parents.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it doesn't make sense at all because they've done everything for you. Like, what have they done wrong? Nothing. I think instead of...
Well, let me pause you there.
Sure.
In most cases.
Yes.
There are a
very
lot
good point.
of...
I was just speaking for myself.
Of course.
Yes.
And I just, like, again, we just always want to shed a light on the people that haven't had those kinds of situations. And there's plenty of them,
that breaks my heart. I just can't even imagine. Like, all of the trauma you get as adoption, as an adoptee, on top of being placed somewhere with more and more trauma.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
So we'd love to hear from you and be that support for you, because obviously you have lacked support a lot of your life and understanding who you are. And again, we're just trying to hear all and every voice of an adoptee. So if
please
you feel
out.
comfortable, even if it's just to us or being anonymous, whatever the case may be, like, we'd love to hear your story and we'd love to support you, because I think everyone deserves that type of community.
Yeah, 100%. Anyway, continue with that.
Yeah, I
just wanted to stop and kind of mention
it was that. Just what I said here is just helpful for adoptive parents to understand the source of their child's anger, because instead of becoming defensive, they can acknowledge those feelings. And I think that's just important. Again, another role for this triad for adoptive parents to really just deeply understand where the adoptee is coming.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of, I highlighted a lot of that because I'm really just trying to understand all parts of adoption, not just my part, because I understand and feel that fully.
That's our part of the, like our point of view, obviously. So it's like, we want to make it better for like our part, but there's no way of doing that without acknowledging the other parts of it.
Right.
So I think that that's really important. The next section of this is
life isn't fair.
It isn't.
No, I was just about to say that.
It isn't fair. Let's see. For me, I guess just kind of as a sum up with this section, I had said that a lot of adoptees feel out of control, and that control is something that we are always chasing, essentially. Which goes on to, let me see here. The quote here on page 98. Basically like this, I guess I'll just kind of start at the top of this, top of the section. Feeling like a victim sometimes has a paralyzing effect on an adoptee, because even though he tries to control his environment, he still doesn't feel as if he's in control of his life. And the part that I highlighted was, his striving to be complete was disrupted by someone taking over his life and altering it forever. That really, I don't even really necessarily have like thoughts on it. It's more like it shook me, and it was really like, oh, okay, yeah, this is why we feel out of control. And it's like literally someone just like picked you up and scooped you up and was just like throw you in some random spot in the world, and we're like, okay, hope this works out.
Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah. It's like, that's it, when you put it into kind of like break it down to the basics in that way, it's very jarring, I suppose.
In like that first paragraph, I had nothing. I had the second paragraph spoke to me. I put 3 exclamation points. It was pretty much talking about how adoptees often have poor frustration tolerance or impulse control. This means that the slightest things, such as difficulty in tying their shoes or finding an object, may make them inappropriately angry and reactive. And I can attest to this. If things don't go my way, I get extremely frustrated. I like shut down and I get super, super irritated. And like my dad just knows, like, oh, it didn't go her way, or like, it's fine. Like everyone in my life understands it now, but I think for a while, like, they just didn't understand, like, why are you so upset? Like, we went on this route instead of this route, it's like little things that don't matter. I would explode on them. And another part in this is, it's just, in other words, it's easier for them to control the rest of their family than it is for them to control themselves. So I'd always tried to, like, I guess in a sense, make it about me. Like, how can I make sure we're doing this? Because I'm in control with that, but it's not really controlling me, it's controlling them. Oh, it's so confusing. And I don't even know how to, like, put it out in words correctly, where it's like, they don't think they're in control. Like, it's just a mind thing that I think I'm doing, but they have no idea that I'm doing that.
Which I was going to say, while you were saying that, I was thinking of something with how plans kind of start to kind of fall apart a little bit. And I kind of started to kind of catch on near the end of what you were saying, being like, oh yeah, this is actually connected to like what I do. Because I'm always the kind of person where it's like, I have to fix it before anyone knows something is wrong. That's what, and I'm panicking. Like if something goes wrong with plans, or it's like, I can't tell someone till the last minute when it actually happens. Like I'm going to fix it in the meantime.
Interesting. Oh, I shut down. I get just so pissed off.
See, for me, it's like people probably maybe, I guess I don't really know. I would have to ask my friends. They've never really, or my family is like, they've never really said that they perceive me as anxious in those situations. I guess an example being, like my family, like, gosh, my family, we haven't traveled together, the four of us, in a very long time. I think the last time the four of us together was when I was in Paris for study abroad in 2012. So it's been almost 10 years. And then like back then was, I mean, I was 20 at the time. So it wasn't like I was given the responsibility to do everything. Like my dad was doing stuff because he had been to Paris before, and something went wrong. And I knew something was going wrong because one of the...
Is this the train?
Yes. Oh my God, I've told you this already.
You told the story on the podcast, I believe.
With the subway being closed down?
I think so.
Yeah, so it was like things like that where it was like, oh my God, I have to come up with an alternative. Oh God, it's about to happen. Oh my God. And it was just like trying to figure out other alternative options. And then like that just like caused me more anxiety. Whereas like when I was working at Disney World and I had family visit me, like certain things and reservations, because that everything that you do, I mean, basically, if you're going to Disney and you don't have reservations anywhere, you're doing it wrong. I just have to put that out there. But, and I'm not like that. I'm a planner. So if you go with me, and you let me plan it, it's like I have all these things in place. So like when certain things would like not work out time-wise, I was like, okay, let's look and see how long it'll take to get there, how long this will work out, and just like how I can work this out to make sure that it works, that it's all going to be perfect.
I'm definitely like that now, but when I'm a kid, I don't have too much control over it.
That's
so I would just shut down. I'd be so mad. I'd be mad at my mom for driving slow, but it's like, you're driving the speed limit. You're probably, you're doing what you're supposed to do. It's just little things that I would be so frustrated, but I definitely get where you're coming from.
Have I told you about the time I ran after a bus?
Was that also in Paris?
No, it was when I was like 8. Because it's just like really good example.
Where was that?
England.
I think you did talk about that also, because I knew it was somewhere not in the United States.
It was in Europe when my family did a 3-week train trip over like in the UK when I was 8 years old. And there was a time when we were waiting for a bus to get somewhere because we were just like relying on trains and buses and things like that. And I don't know. I don't even remember the circumstances, but I remember running after a bus in tears because I thought we were missing the bus. And they opened the door and we were like, we're going here. And they're just like, oh no, that's the next bus. And I was like, what? Like I was so mortified that I chased after this bus. And it's like a joke in my family. It's like, remember that one time Teresa chased after the bus? And I'm like, I was trying to save us from being stranded, which, I mean, whatever. Being stranded in the UK is a fine situation. It's fine. But at the time, it was like, what are we doing? What can I do to help? I need to fix this, which even, I mean, that's kind of just something like when I've been more recently told that story, I'm like, oh, I was trying to save the day. I was 8, but I was trying to save the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's just like, that's, I think, where like the control.
I agree.
Comes back. And I think we kind of, I'm sure we both kind of do that in different ways. And like as we're growing older, it's like we get to be more in control. So it's kind of like, well,
it works out for the best.
It kind of works out in that way. We're just really good organizers. So I'll take it. That's fine with me.
Be lucky to have me in your life. Like
it's just like, I'll make the reservation. I'll make these plans. I'll do X, Y, and Z. Which when it comes to you and me, it's always just like, well, I did it already. It's like, but I was gonna.
I guess. All right, thanks.
You sent the email already? I was going to do it. Which I love it because we're very thorough.
Very true.
Let's see. Okay, so that feeling out of control, you had mentioned the impulse control and everything. I guess the only other part of this is just kind of talking about being like overly responsible. And I think it's just like, for me, that kind of goes back to just being like anticipating things.
Right.
You know, kind of with this whole there's a lot here. The only other part of this section with the life isn't fair is on the bottom of page 99. I just kind of want to read this and see what people think. There's a lot to this section, so I'll kind of skip ahead, but basically this says, like, being adopted sometimes makes an adoptee feel as if he's perpetually a child. And as B.J. Lifton says, who has ever heard of an adopted adult? This adoptee didn't choose the circumstances of his life, and he feels as if he's powerless over them even as an adult. And I underlined 3 times, who has ever heard of an adopted adult?
I underlined that also.
Well, we're here.
We are here.
There's a lot of us. And I kind of was like struck by this line, who has ever heard of an adopted adult? And I just wrote, we are here. And
that goes back to, let's say people like our parents' age who are adopted. They didn't have resources. They kept it pretty quiet.
Well, that, and also it's just like technology wasn't what it was.
Right.
That didn't exist for anybody.
And I think we've gotten a couple people where it's like, my mom found your podcast and she's really connected with it because they didn't have those resources. And yet there are so many adoptive adults, grandmas and grandpas who are adopted, who just can benefit so much by just having their voices heard. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah. I think it's just that I had to stop and just like, again, write down, we are here, because I always try to remind folks that you don't think past, like when people are thinking of adoption and thinking of the ways in which it can be misconstrued as, or not even misconstrued, or like people kind of like do it in a different way where it's, I don't know, I guess, for example, that YouTube family, I can't even remember their names, but they basically like adopted that one child from somewhere in Asia, and it felt very exploited as far as his life goes, and he ended up being rehomed, and I'm like, that is such a mess. This is being done for social media. This is such a mess. And nobody thinks past the what you do on Instagram. Here they are, actually. We're looking at them right now. Cut. Oh, God.
Wow.
Micah and James.
Unadopted.
Stop her. Share every step of their parenting journey, except the last. We'll have to share this on our page. Basically, there's a lot to be said about these families that are
doing it for the wrong reasons.
Especially just with our day and age with social media. It's really problematic. And even the ones that aren't, you know, Instagram famous or whatever. It's like, these are the situations in which people think of, like, what can we do, like on This Is Us. Not This Is Us. Little Fires Everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
When the Reese Witherspoon character made a really cute baby shower for this adoptive mother who had adopted a child who was, I think, Chinese. And they did really cute party favors, including fortune cookies. And just being like, well, she's Chinese. Isn't that cute? And it's like those cute little kitschy little things. But it's like, nobody thinks about it past making it cute.
Yeah, and past the baby shower. Past
them being an infant and being like, welcome this tiny, like, bundle of joy. It's like, they grow up. They are still going to be your adult children or they're going to be your adolescent. They're going to be your young adult. They're going to be your adult. They're going to be everything that you imagine a child to be, regardless of whether they're adopted or not.
Exactly.
And that is what, like, this part of it, page 99. Please, just anybody who's reading this, we are here. And this is what we're doing this for, is to give recognition to those of us who are, to all of us who are just like, we exist.
Who's been silent way too long.
Yeah. I'm off my soapbox now. That's all.
Well, that little section that you're just kidding. That was a really good point. I totally agree. And I think we just need to continue to put that out there and continue to do what we're doing because it matters.
Yeah. Because every every person that's adopted is going to grow up, hopefully, hopefully that that this trauma doesn't get to their mental wellness to a point where that doesn't happen. Like, I don't know. I don't want to, put a dark element on things, but it's like,
that's also very common. We've touched on that, and that's a part of a chapter that we've already discussed, and it's a big part of adoptees.
Just adoptees in their lives, and just like their mental wellness, and just the mental illnesses that come of that. And it's not easy. Like, people need to realize that these kinds of things need to be comfortable topics that you talk about. If you are going to adopt, dear God, be prepared and read this book. Those I
do research.
Like, this is the book that really should be something that adoptive parents are doing, because they're the ones in the most control when it comes to the triad. So
absolutely.
Now I'm off my soapbox and backing up.
So I guess that was the only part we had in that. We are just jumping into identity, which is also a big section, I think, for us. And in this chapter, it is a couple pages long. Gosh, it's the rest of the chapter.
I didn't have a lot in the beginning. I
did.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Let's start
there. The whole first paragraph, I just made it into like this whole bulk of something. I did highlight this part though. Not only does he find it difficult to identify his own personal history with that of his family, but he experiences a great deal of conflict around the idea of searching for that personal history. We've talked about this time and time again, and I think this is a huge topic for adoptees, just your past history, who you are, medical history, race, identity. I mean, the list is endless on just who are you? And I think this goes into also just my own personal experience. Even though I was always searching for, that question to be filled, I'm still left with a lot of unknowns. So I think we've talked about this in other episodes that will maybe drop later or have already dropped at this point. But just that it's okay not to search, because you still might not get the answers that you're looking for. And I think that's just a big thing to really think about if you're going to do the search. Not everything is going to be answered, and there's still going to be those unknown questions. And the lack of this personal history is technically like a handicap for the adopted, because of the importance of knowing one's past before planning for the future. And with us trying to be in control and our planning sense, like, you want to have everything lined up, but you can't have everything lined up to move forward. You just have to do it.
I think with that, especially with the adolescents with this section, really, I just bring up again the comparison that I made to having it be a 1,000 piece puzzle to a 5,000 piece puzzle. Being an adolescent is hard.
It's huge.
But imagine that without having anything to go off of.
Yeah.
And
that's a big part of this section, just talking about being a teenager, just trying to figure out who you are in general is already tough. But on top of that, not knowing your race, identity, your family, you've never seen someone who looks like you. There's no blood relatives in the whole Minnesota, let's say, for us.
Or the
country. We don't know. And it's just all of those unknowns are so difficult to really wrap your head around. And still is.
Yeah. It doesn't really go away. And I think that's really interesting that they mentioned that it is a handicap to them. Because it really just adds some depth to it, I suppose.
It hinders so many aspects of life. And you don't really think about it until it's brought up. Doctor's office, if you want to get pregnant, what's your background? Well, we probably should do more tests on you because you don't know anything. Oh, okay. If you have like a rare disease, well, you don't know your background, let's do more tests on you. It's just always like this daunting thing on you that you just have no control over, and it's just really sucky. Honestly. Yeah. It really does suck.
Yeah. It's definitely a lot to have to handle. And identity is definitely something that we've talked about time and time again, and it's really important to us, as far as also just realizing that obviously other communities deal with this too, and we want to kind of bridge the gap as far as being able to talk about it with other folks of different communities that have identity questions. Yeah, it's just there's a lot to be said about identity, and I don't think people really realize how good they have it when they are they've never questioned their identity.
Yeah.
That's, it's not something people have to think about, and that's a privilege.
I totally get that. Are you on the next page now?
Yeah, next page, 102, 103. Let's see.
102, I had a lot too.
What did you have on 102? I didn't have anything highlighted.
I didn't really write this in our doc, but I think this is another good discussion question.
Okay.
And I kind of want to, like, reach this out to you too, just because I'm curious on what you have to say. Since I've done the search, I think it's a little bit different, but there are some adoptees who deny being curious about their origins. This seems to be by some professionals as an attempt to avoid upsetting their adoptive parents who want to maintain the illusion of a natural family. So I guess someone who doesn't want to search, do you feel that, like, denial in a sense to, like, really want to express yourself in your culture?
I think I used to think that, and that was something that I probably would have used to think of.
And you weren't exposed to it as much, so I think the more you get exposed, the more it's like, no, I'm proud of it.
I think it's
I don't want to put words in your mouth either.
No, it's just like more so that, like, the more I look into doing it, I'm just like more indifferent, which I think is a huge signal to me. Before, probably about a year ago, I felt like I was supposed to do this, and I contacted a organization called the Search Angels to start the process, and did, but it felt so wrong, and I stopped it almost immediately after just a couple weeks, because I was like, I actually really want to do this. Like, I don't feel anything besides
and that's just
panic.
your own personal. It's nothing to do with your adoptive parents, or just
no.
Okay,
no. It was, and I don't think it's really at this point. It's like what I want to focus on is who I get to be, despite all of these other outside things, and who I am. With being a Colombian in Minnesota and being someone who's well-spoken, that gets to do stuff like this podcast and who gets to have these different traits that are outside of my adoptive family that they don't have, that I'm like, I get to do this because I have this gift or whatever, whatever it is. So I think it was just like, and I think me kind of like dipping my toe in it was kind of like what I needed to do to be like, no, I'm out. Like, this is not what I want whatsoever. Yeah. I would say, like, the political climate in Colombia right now is very problematic. And whenever I do see these videos or pictures or articles about the horrible treatment of the citizens of Colombia and what's happening there, like, it is so much more than what we've ever experienced here. I mean, we're in the Twin Cities. There's been a lot that's gone on in the last year. It is so, and I don't want to compare apples to oranges, but it's like
it's really
the bloodshed and the violence is so harsh. I can't watch more than a few seconds before being like, no, I can't, because it's like, now I'm at a point where I'm like connecting to my culture and my people and my original identity and like what I can like incorporate in these things and being like, a Colombian woman in Minnesota. It's like, that's what I like. That's what I'm proud of. That's what I want to cultivate with my identity. And that has nothing to do with my adoptive parents. And I love that. And it's just like, has to do with me.
Yes.
I can't say that when I see those videos and everything going on in Colombia, I don't think about like, I wonder if this is what's going to end any possibility of reaching birth family at some point. I will say that is, and I mean, that's totally situational, just given everything that's going on.
Well, I definitely reached out to my birth mom right away, and it's 2 blocks from her. Jeez. Where a lot of that was going on. She's like, we don't go out of the house, we know to stay inside.
Oh my gosh.
But it's still like, you think about it, and I would think about it if I didn't even know her. I would just be like, wow, like, they must be there.
I mean, is like, if your birth mom was, I guess, exposed more to the news of America and seeing that everything that happened in Brooklyn Park recently was 2 blocks from you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of crazy how that happens, but there's I think a lot of weight there. But honestly, now that I'm past that, again, like, this is, I guess, first time mentioning that, the fact that I did start pursuing that and just kind of trying to be honest with everything is just like, yeah, I did like touch on it, but it's like, It didn't ring true to me, and that was the first time I ever did that.
And I love that you are sticking with that. And I just like to hear your different perspectives on different parts of it, because denial can come from just guilt and shame of not trying to make your, your adoptive parents feel that. And I definitely felt that when I was doing the search, just that guilt and kind of just uneasy feeling like, I don't want to make you feel bad for wanting to do this, but I don't want my birth mom to feel bad for me not wanting to talk to her. Like, it was just give and pull all the time. I just felt like I was going in multiple directions of unknown and a ton of guilt that way.
Well, and I think what's interesting too is like that these are, I think, coinciding with a previous chapter talking about the different attachment theories and the fact that we kind of connect with the different attachment theories, whereas like Erica feels closer connected to the one where you become one the minute that you are in the womb. I feel as though that I connect to the part where I'm in the womb. It's just kind of like mostly separate entities. And then when you're abandoned, it's like, well, I know nothing else besides being alone. And I think that really connects to this too.
I think so too.
I think that's
and just who we are. Like, it really makes sense. Even our previous episode, just on relationships, all of that.
Oh my gosh, 100%.
Very interesting.
Whoa! Later in this section,
I can't wait for you to talk about this.
Why?
Because cheese is your love language, and I just want you to just go for the quote before you go for the next part, because I'm just so excited. On the quote.
It's starred. So on page 103, basically just the quote here is that adoptees have a Swiss cheese identity. There are a lot of holes in it.
I hate Swiss cheese.
It can be a cheese. I like
cool. Cheddar.
I do too. I prefer cheddar.
But that's just really interesting. And that literally just made me laugh out loud when I read that, because if you don't know Risa, she loves cheese.
Yeah, if you don't
that's
know that
literally, then like, who are you? You don't know us.
Literally, like, my friends bring me cheese when I'm sad. Like, that's
cheese
like,
when you're happy.
Yeah, it's like,
cheese if someone passed away.
Here's a nice,
cheese if
a nice Stilton.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Here's some brie.
Yeah.
You did it.
And that's the best gift.
Yeah, it is the best gift.
So that made me laugh really hard, but I think that's a really good
it's
visual.
A good way to go about it, but yet you're still whole and delicious. Despite
you can go with a lot of things.
Yeah, you go with a lot of things. Yeah.
That doesn't even make sense.
It doesn't make sense. But whatever. I can identify with cheese and I'm okay with it.
What else did you have on this page, if anything?
Let's see here. Some of which, just like at the bottom of 102, adoptees are sometimes preoccupied with existential concerns. You've gotten so many texts from me being like, I'm having an existential crisis. It's just like an issue, and just being disconnected from genetic heritage here. And basically it says like randomly placed in another milieu cause them to lose any sense of the rightness of things. Rather, they feel that their life is purposeless, chaotic, and irrational without order or meaning. This causes difficulties in the spiritual life and poses problems in making significant choices. So, I don't know, that was kind of like, that rang true to me. Like, that was something that I underlined and just kind of was like, I mean, I definitely am someone who's like striving to have a purpose. Exhibit A.
Exhibit B.
All of this. So it's, I think that's all something that I connect with, but at the same time, it's not something that I'm feel hindered by anymore. Sure. It's kind of just like, whatever, I'm gonna keep striving for perfection and just keep doing what I'm doing.
And what's next?
It doesn't bother me. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What's next? It's like, it doesn't bother me anymore. It's just kind of like, yeah, if I'm gonna be the person that keeps striving for new projects, so be it. Oh no. I don't have I don't know. I'm cautious to use the word ordinary, but it's like, I don't want to be just ordinary. I feel like, and we've talked about this before, like, we have to do something with the cards we've been dealt. Kind of where I land with that. Okay, so we talked about cheese, we talked about purpose.
That honestly is kind of, that wraps it up for me with what I've underlined in kind of my bold points in these chapters. This chapter, excuse me.
Let me see. Just like checking to see if this is something that I'm No, I guess really the last thing I want to touch on is page 105. The first step for all triad members is to assess the level of awareness they have about adoption issues. In other words, the myths and the stereotypes versus reality. None of these issues can be addressed successfully unless they're also addressed honestly.
Mm-hmm.
The depth of the pain and the many issues caused by that pain are not easy to face, but for healing to begin, doing so is essential. Parents, if they are honest in their expectations about their child, can, with the help from a professional, be tremendously effective in facilitating healing in their child. Mm-hmm. And the next part of the book deals with this healing.
And we're already going to be on
part three. So,
I guess overall, like, I can totally just agree to that. I think this whole chapter I just think was a great conversation for all triads. I think over and over I've talked about this, but I think adoptive parents, and we've mentioned this even in this episode, play a huge role. And I think by listening and understanding the adoptee in all stages of life, baby, toddler, preteen, adult, as we continue to grow as a relationship with you and with ourselves, just really listening to that as a listener and just understanding your views might change, because as an adoptee, our views are, I would say, correct.
Yeah.
And they don't have much say. I think that is just really, really important as an adoptive parent, just to be very open-minded and do your research. And I think that's what I got out of this chapter, is just all parts of the triad play a huge part, but I think the adoptive parents really just need to listen.
And that's really a lot of what I said as well, just saying that awareness and transparency are truly the necessary elements for adoptees and the counterparts of the triad. And the next section, like we just said, is going around the healing process, but adoptees and adoptive parents need to first identify these issues and see where they are negatively affecting relationships in order to start to heal. It has to start with that awareness. And I identified a lot with the overall idea of this chapter, even though maybe the specific examples weren't quite spot on, besides the cheese. The overall issues discussed in the summary are really spot on with what we usually discuss for kind of run-of-the-mill, adoptee mental health issues, basically being abandonment, rejection, perfection, control, all of those kinds of things. We ask that in all of our interviews with other adoptees. Like, our interviews are very similarly formatted for each story, and we typically ask about those mental health issues, and that kind of gets that spot on. So going on to the discussion questions for this chapter, we had talked previously about the biological children with siblings that are adopted feeling as if they're raised with a handicapped person who needs 95 or 90% of the attention. Obviously, we said we don't really love the way that that's worded and that it's necessarily appropriate, but if they feel guilty for either not being adopted or not being, or just kind of feeling a certain way about like not being the center of attention in those kinds of ways. Yeah.
Or did you feel like you lacked attention and now that's really caused issues with you down the road? I mean, that's another part. I mean, I know this is mainly about adoption and adoptees and their traumas, but I know it can be traumas for other people too.
And I guess that would also say, like, I guess I can't necessarily, maybe besides your brother and a handful of others, to necessarily like respond on this and be following us. So maybe posing that as also adoptees, what do you perceive as your relationship, if it's being hindered by this kind of element, as far as how you think that your sibling who was biologically, by your adoptive parents, if you think that if you perceive it a certain way.
Or do you feel like you got all the attention? Like it can go both ways.
Or
that's a
vice
really
versa
great,
too,
really great point.
Yeah, because obviously we know that our audience is not necessarily the adoptee siblings. So it's like, how do you perceive these other siblings? And I think you and I can both ask our siblings to see if there is anything that there is to be said about that.
A great, honest, open discussion for you and your family too. If you don't want to share it in our comments, just making these conversations more normal all around, I think is really important.
Absolutely. Well, as always, follow, like, subscribe, comment, leave us any reactions that you have to this.
Reviews, share it with your friends and family. Even if you aren't adopted, you know someone who is, or who maybe is going through identity issues.
Yeah.
And it might not be adoption, but
Send
they can relate
way.
to us. Yes, and I just want to really shout out to a lot of our followers. We have gotten a couple messages even just this week.
Yeah, lots this week.
With detailed information, long paragraphs of just how they've connected, and we appreciate that so much. That's what keeps us going. That's why we started this. I mean, we truly connect with you, and we love those messages, and we appreciate those so much. And we're just glad we can be there for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said, Erica. So keep that coming. If you do have any suggestions for future episodes as well, please send them our way. Otherwise, that concludes Chapter 8 of the Primal Wound. And if you're looking for other resources, please check out our website at colombianinfluence.com. COLOMBIAN influence.com. And we will see you next time.
Later!
Bye!
Killed them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Oof.
Earthquake!